As we grow older, something subtle yet profound begins to shift within us. It's not just the physical changes we notice, it's something deeper, something quieter. Our energy, once spent freely and without hesitation, becomes more precious. Not just the energy of our bodies, but of our hearts and spirits too. We begin to see with greater clarity how often we have extended ourselves for others, how many times we've said yes when our hearts quietly whispered no. And somewhere along the line, many of us were taught that kindness means never turning away, never refusing, always being available, even when it costs us our peace. But the truth is, reaching this chapter of life is a gift, and it comes with the undeniable right to protect your peace, your space, and your spirit. There comes a point where you realize that not everyone deserves your energy. This doesn't mean you become bitter or closed off. It means you've become wise. You've begun to understand the difference between being kind and being used, between being supportive and being drained. It's okay, more than okay, to draw lines where once you didn't, to set boundaries where once you made room. Life is too short, and your heart is too valuable to be spent on relationships that don't return your care, conversations that leave you feeling smaller, or obligations that weigh on you like anchors. With time, you start to recognize the constant takers, those who only reach out when they need something, never to truly connect or offer you the same support. You notice the chronic critics, those who chip away at your confidence under the guise of concern or humor. You become aware of the guilt trippers, who manipulate your goodness with silence or subtle words that make you question your worth. You begin to see through the quiet competitors, the ones who smile but never truly celebrate you, who diminish your light so there seems brighter. And then there are the passive-aggressive manipulators, people who won't say outright what they mean, but whose jabs and jokes leave you uneasy, doubting yourself, and walking on eggshells. These patterns, these people, they drain the soul little by little. And as you age, you begin to understand the cost of letting them linger in your life. Your days are too precious to be spent explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, too valuable to be poured into cups that never fill yours in return. So you start choosing peace, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. You start stepping back, not to punish, but to preserve your light. You don't need a dramatic farewell or a confrontation. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet decision, a simple turning inward, a new priority placed firmly on your well-being. You answer calls less often. You decline invitations that feel more like obligations. You focus your love and care on those who give it back, who see you and honor your presence. And something magical happens. Your life begins to feel lighter. The space you create by letting go becomes the space where joy grows, where laughter returns, where rest finally finds you. You discover that aging isn't about fading, it's about refining. It's about distilling your time and your relationships down to their purest form. You stop measuring your worth by how much you give away. You stop believing that love means sacrifice without limit. Instead, you honor your experience, your wisdom, and your right to choose peace. You don't need dozens of friends, endless obligations, or constant approval. You need sincerity. You need connection. You need truth. And most importantly, you need to know that your joy is not something you have to earn by enduring pain or proving your value to those who refuse to see it. Joy is your birthright. Peace is your inheritance. And your heart, after all it has carried, deserves nothing less. And as this clarity deepens, you begin to see just how much of your life has been lived in a kind of quiet performance. Not for applause, not for recognition, but simply to keep the peace, to be accepted, to be needed. You see now how deeply ingrained it was to smile when you felt sorrow, to nod when you wanted to shake your head, to say yes when every part of your being whispered no. It wasn't always conscious. It was survival, instinct, a learned response to a world that rewarded politeness over honesty, compliance over courage. You remember the countless moments you swallowed your truth because you feared being seen as too sensitive, too emotional, too much. You recall how often you bent until you broke, mistaking sacrifice for love and exhaustion for virtue. But now, something has shifted, not suddenly, but steadily, like a tide pulling you home to yourself. You're no longer willing to carry the weight of other people's expectations if it means abandoning your own inner peace. You're no longer trying to win the approval of people who only ever saw fragments of you. The version that made them comfortable, that met their needs while you're sat quietly in the corner. Instead, you're learning, perhaps for the first time, what it means to belong fully to yourself. And in this journey of self-return, you start noticing the subtle ways you reclaim your power. How you pause before responding. How you take a breath before agreeing. How you allow silence to exist in spaces where you once rushed to fill it. You're no longer afraid of the discomfort that comes with setting boundaries because you understand that discomfort is not cruelty, it is clarity. And clarity is love. Not just love for others, but love for yourself. You start forgiving yourself, not just for what you did, but for what you allowed, for what you didn't yet know, for the ways you tried to survive. You speak to yourself in kinder tones, offering grace instead of judgment. You begin to heal not by erasing the past, but by rewriting your role in it. Not the victim of others' choices, but the author of your own unfolding. You begin to let go, piece by piece, not just of people, but of the roles you no longer need to play. The fixer, the peacemaker, the invisible backbone. You step away from the emotional labor that was never yours to carry, from conversations that go nowhere, from dynamics that drain you more than they deepen you. You start honoring your energy as sacred, choosing carefully where you invest it, recognizing that your time and attention are currencies of immeasurable worth. You surround yourself with softness, with people who honor your honesty, with moments that bring quiet joy, with routines that nourish instead of deplete. And in that softness, you discover a strength you never knew existed. The strength of simply being, of showing up as you are without shrinking, without over-explaining, without guilt. You begin to build a life that is slower, but richer, quieter, but more profound. A life where your presence is not earned through effort, but embraced through truth. You find yourself dreaming again, not in a desperate, grasping way, but in a grounded, expansive way, knowing now that your dreams are not selfish, they are sacred. You give yourself permission to want more, not more stuff, but more meaning, more alignment, more peace. And through it all, you come to realize that self-respect is not built in grand gestures, but in the quiet, daily choices to choose yourself over and over again. This is your becoming, not loud, not showy, but real. And that is more than enough. And as this quiet becoming continues, you start to notice how the world responds differently when you are rooted in your truth. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You no longer rush to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. No longer chase after validation like a thirst that can never be quenched. Instead, you find sustenance within, realizing that self-acceptance is not just the beginning of healing, but the foundation of freedom. You begin to understand that not every conflict is yours to resolve. Not every invitation deserves a yes, and not every silence needs to be filled. There is power in restraint, in discernment, in the quiet refusal to abandon yourself just to keep the peace. You become fluent in your own emotional language, recognizing your needs not as burdens, but as signals guiding you back to wholeness. You learn to stay with discomfort long enough to learn its name and its lesson. You stop apologizing for the space you take, the feelings you feel, the boundaries you set. Your self-trust deepens, not because you always get it right, but because you no longer betray your own knowing just to fit into someone else's narrative. You stop confusing attention with care, proximity with connection, intensity with love. You begin to see clearly. Real love does not ask you to shrink, to hide, to hustle for worth. It invites you to exhale, to soften, to be. And in this exhale, you start to rebuild your life around what nourishes you rather than what depletes you. You find beauty in solitude, not as a punishment, but as a sanctuary. You start to enjoy your own company in ways you never thought possible. listening to your own thoughts without judgment, treating your inner world with reverence rather than resistance. You stop performing healing and begin embodying it, not through perfection, but through presence. Your relationships shift, some deepen, others fade, not with resentment, but with gratitude for the role they played in your growth. You no longer hold on out of obligation or fear of being alone. You trust that what is meant for you will not ask you to betray yourself to keep it. You create new rituals, small but sacred. Morning stillness, midday walks, quiet evenings of reflection, each one a reminder that peace is not a destination, but a daily practice. And as you move through the world more rooted, more whole, you begin to notice how much lighter everything feels. Not because life has become easier, but because you have stopped carrying what was never yours. You become your own anchor, your own guide, your own home. And in this home, there is room for your joy, your sorrow, your hope, your fear, all of it welcome, all of it valid. You're no longer in a rush to arrive because you've realized the journey is the destination. You live each day not in anticipation of some future salvation, but in deep presence with what is, trusting, surrendering, becoming. And in that sacred becoming, you find not just yourself, but the world meeting you with the same depth, the same grace, the same quiet power you've learned to offer yourself. And as you walk further into this new chapter of your life, where clarity outshines confusion and peace becomes your true north, you begin to understand that self-growth is not a destination, but an ever-deepening unfolding. You see now how all the moments that once broke you open were not punishments, but invitations. Calls to become more honest, more alive, more aligned with who you truly are beneath the layers of conditioning and fear. You no longer strive to be understood by everyone, because you understand yourself, and that becomes enough. You start to release the need for constant validation, realizing that the loudest noise often comes from the most insecure places, and silence can be the strongest response. You stop confusing productivity with worthiness and recognize that rest is not laziness. It is a sacred act of self-preservation, a declaration that your existence is not dependent on how much you produce, but how deeply you live. The voices that once filled your head with doubt and shame grow quieter, not because they disappeared, but because you've learned to speak to yourself with more kindness than they ever could. You soften into yourself, not in weakness, but in strength, choosing grace over judgment, compassion over comparison. The people who once drained you no longer have access to your inner world, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You see how protecting your peace sometimes means walking away from what you once begged to stay, and that this too is love, love for yourself, for your future, for the sacredness of your journey. You discover that not all closure comes from conversations. Sometimes it comes from silence, from choosing to move forward without needing to relive the pain. You begin to honor the slow mornings, the mundane tasks, the quiet evenings as sacred, not because they are dramatic, but because they are real. You look in the mirror and see not just your reflection, but your resilience, the battles you've fought silently, the nights you cried yourself to sleep, the mornings you got up anyway. You no longer chase healing like a finish line, but embrace it as a spiral, sometimes returning to old wounds with new wisdom, sometimes falling back only to rise more rooted. Your journey becomes less about fixing and more about remembering. Remembering who you were before the world taught you who to be. Remembering that softness is not weakness, that stillness is not stagnation, that being alone does not mean being abandoned. You start to recognize the sacred in the everyday, the way the light spills across your floor, the quiet hum of your breath, the warmth of your own presence. You realize you are not behind. You are on your own timeline, unfolding in the exact rhythm meant for you. You stop apologizing for your depth, your needs, your truth. You let go of shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for your expansion. You choose yourself every day, not in selfishness, but in sacred responsibility. And in doing so, you become a sanctuary, not just for yourself, but for others who are also learning that it's safe to be whole. You become a living prayer, a quiet revolution, a steady flame in a world that often forgets the power of tenderness. And as you continue walking, step by step, breath by breath, you carry the knowing that no matter what happens, you are no longer lost. You are found. You are not merely surviving. You are slowly, steadily, beautifully becoming. And as you continue walking this path with steady grace and quiet conviction, you begin to sense the subtle yet profound transformation unfolding from within. A shift that is not loud or dramatic, but deeply rooted in truth, as if your soul is finally exhaling after holding its breath for years. As if the weight you've carried for so long is dissolving not because the burdens have disappeared, but because you're no longer carrying them the same way, no longer identifying with them as your own. You are no longer defined by the pain, the past, or the projections others placed upon you, for you have reclaimed the authorship of your own story. And in doing so, you are rewriting every chapter with more intention, more honesty, more heart than ever before. And even on the days when the old wounds ache and the shadows return, you meet them not with fear, but with familiarity, like long-lost parts of yourself seeking integration rather than exile, because healing no longer means erasing the pain, but embracing it with the tenderness it always needed. And in this embrace, you begin to witness the magic of your own alchemy, the way your presence can soften even the harshest memories, the way your breath can ground you in the middle of chaos, the way your love, especially for yourself, becomes a quiet revolution that ripples outward into every corner of your life, changing not only how you see yourself, but how you show up for the world. And suddenly your boundaries are no longer walls of fear, but bridges of clarity. Your solitude, no longer a punishment, but a sanctuary. Your dreams no longer distant fantasies, but sacred maps guiding you closer to the life you are now ready to live. And you see how every moment of stillness, every pause, every whisper from your intuition was never empty or meaningless. It was preparing you, softening you, sharpening your discernment so you could finally choose from a place of wholeness rather than wounding. And now, as you stand in this sacred space between who you were and who you are becoming, you no longer rush to fill the silence, to prove your worth, to chase what was never meant for you, because you have learned that peace is not found in the noise of validation, but in the quiet knowing of your own heart. And in that knowing, you move with less urgency and more trust, less fear and more surrender, no longer resisting the flow of your life, but dancing with it, breathing with it, rising with it. And in this rhythm, you realize that your very existence is a miracle, not because it is perfect or pain-free, but because it is real, it is yours, and you're finally living it on your own terms, with all the complexities and contradictions that make you human and beautifully unique. And in embracing this truth, you become a beacon for others who have lost their way in the storm, a gentle reminder that freedom begins when we stop asking for permission to be ourselves, that joy grows when we stop watering weeds of doubt and comparison, that love deepens when it is rooted in self-respect rather than sacrifice, and you find yourself cultivating a garden of relationships that nourish rather than drain, that celebrate rather than compete, that hold space rather than demand change, where laughter is easy, vulnerability is safe, and kindness flows without conditions, because here, in this place you have created with intention and courage, you have finally learned the most profound lesson of all, that to truly love others, you must first learn to love yourself fiercely, tenderly, and without apology. And with this love as your foundation, you step forward into each new day ready to live fully, give generously, and receive gracefully, knowing that your peace, your boundaries, your voice are not only your birthright, but the greatest gifts you can offer to a world that desperately needs the light only you can shine. As you continue to nurture this newfound sense of self-love and unwavering boundaries, you begin to notice how your life naturally shifts in ways both subtle and profound. The people who once drained your energy or questioned your worth start to fade gently into the background, not through bitterness or rejection, but simply because the space you've created no longer fits the old patterns that kept you small. And in their place, new connections emerge, relationships rooted in mutual respect, kindness, and authenticity. People who see you fully, who honor your time and spirit without expectation or demand, who celebrate your victories and hold your hand through challenges without judgment or comparison. And with these connections, your world feels lighter, richer, more expansive, as if you've traded a crowded room full of noise for a quiet garden blooming with rare and precious flowers, each friendship a delicate petal unfolding in its own perfect time. And as you walk through this garden, you carry yourself differently, more gently, more confidently, with the quiet assurance that comes from knowing you no longer have to prove your worth to anyone because it is already inherent, unshakable, a core truth that no one can take away. And this truth empowers you to live with greater clarity and purpose, to say yes to what truly feeds your soul and no to what depletes it without hesitation or guilt, to embrace the fullness of your emotions without fear, knowing that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness, and that your story, your whole story, with its joys and scars, its triumphs and trials, is a testament to your resilience and your capacity for growth. And as you embrace this whole self, you begin to understand that protecting your peace is not an act of isolation, but a radical form of connection to yourself, to your values, to the essence of who you are meant to be. And from this place of groundedness, you find the courage to dream anew, to take risks aligned with your authentic desires, and to live boldly in ways that honor your unique light rather than dimming it for others' comfort. And even when life brings unexpected challenges or moments of doubt, you meet them with grace and patience, holding space for your own healing and learning, because you know now that self-compassion is the cornerstone of true strength. And with each step forward, you build a legacy not just of survival, but of flourishing, inspiring those around you to also reclaim their power and peace, reminding them gently that they too deserve to walk free from the weight of toxic expectations and the chains of unbalanced relationships, that they too can create a life where kindness is a gift freely given and received without sacrifice or depletion. And so your journey becomes a beacon of hope and possibility, a living example that no matter where we are in life's journey, we can always choose to protect our hearts, honor our boundaries, and cultivate a community where love is not conditional but abundant, where peace is not a fleeting luxury but a sustained reality, and where the richness of connection grows from the soil of respect, authenticity, and unwavering self-care. Because in the end, the greatest revolution we can lead is the revolution within, a revolution of kindness to self, fierce enough to transform not only our own lives, but the world we touch with the light of our fully realized, beautifully guarded hearts. As you move forward on this journey of self-respect and self-care, you begin to understand that your time and energy are finite and invaluable resources that must be guarded fiercely, not because you are selfish, but because you have learned through experience that pouring yourself out endlessly leaves you depleted and disconnected from your own needs and desires. The relationships you maintain should be nourishing like a steady stream, not draining like a desert wind. And it is perfectly natural and necessary to reevaluate the people and commitments you carry with you. Sometimes, this means letting go of long-held connections that have outgrown their purpose, or stepping back from obligations that no longer align with your values or contribute to your happiness. It means giving yourself permission to prioritize rest, reflection, and joy without guilt. This process of clearing space in your life creates room for growth, for new opportunities, and for relationships that uplift and inspire rather than exhaust and diminish. You start to notice subtle shifts in how you feel when you honor your boundaries. Your mind quiets, your heart feels lighter, and your body relaxes in a way it hasn't for years. The constant background noise of stress and obligation fades, replaced by a serene awareness that you are living in alignment with your true self. With this newfound clarity, you begin to pursue passions and interests that may have been sidelined for too long. Whether it's picking up a long-forgotten hobby, traveling to a place you've always dreamed of, or simply spending more time in nature absorbing its calming presence, you reclaim parts of your identity that were overshadowed by the demands of others. You learn that joy is not a luxury or a fleeting moment, but a state of being that you are fully entitled to embrace. Along the way, you cultivate a deeper compassion for yourself, recognizing that setting boundaries and saying no are acts of courage that honor your worth and preserve your spirit. You begin to model this self-respect for those around you, showing younger generations that strength is found not in endless giving, but in wise stewardship of one's own energy. Through your example, others learn that it's okay to say no, to walk away from toxic patterns, and to seek out relationships that are mutual and meaningful. And as you continue this practice, you notice the quality of your connections improve dramatically. Your friendships become richer, your family bonds more supportive, and even casual acquaintanceships more genuine. You attract people who respect your limits and cherish your presence, and you find that you no longer need to chase approval or validation from those who do not see your true value. Instead, you stand firmly rooted in the knowledge that your peace is your right and your responsibility. This doesn't mean you become isolated or indifferent. Rather, you become more discerning, choosing to invest your heart in those who bring light and kindness into your life. You learn that kindness without boundaries is not kindness at all, but a recipe for burnout and resentment, and that true generosity flows naturally when it is balanced by self-care and respect. With each passing day, your life becomes a testament to the power of choosing yourself, of nurturing your spirit, honoring your needs, and creating a life filled with purpose, peace, and authentic connection. This journey is ongoing, filled with challenges and triumphs, but it is also deeply rewarding because it is rooted in truth, the truth that your life matters, your energy matters, and above all, your peace is worth protecting with everything you have. As you continue on this lifelong path of honoring your own peace and well-being, it becomes clearer than ever that the journey is not linear, nor is it something you can complete and then forget about. Instead, it's a continuous unfolding, a series of moments where you must choose yourself again and again, reaffirming your boundaries with love and firmness. Life will inevitably bring new challenges and new people, some who will test your resolve, some who will attempt to pull you back into old patterns of obligation and self-sacrifice. But now you have the wisdom, the lived experience, and the deep understanding that your energy, your time, your heart are sacred currencies that cannot be spent carelessly. You know that saying no is not rejection but protection. It is not cruelty but self-respect. It is the foundation upon which all healthy relationships must be built. You no longer need to prove your kindness through exhaustion or validate your worth through endless giving. Instead, you recognize that true kindness begins with kindness to yourself, that generosity is most powerful when it flows from a full cup, and that the most profound love you can offer the world is the love you nurture within your own soul. As you embrace this truth, you begin to see how your relationships transform. Those who truly belong in your life will step forward, drawn by your clarity and your courage to stand in your truth. They will honor your boundaries not as barriers, but as signs of the respect they have for you. And in turn, your capacity to give love and support will deepen and flourish. The people who once drained you, who took without giving or criticized without building, will gradually fade into the background, replaced by connections that uplift, encourage, and celebrate you. This process can be bittersweet. Letting go of long-held ties is never easy, especially when memories and history are involved. But you come to understand that love does not mean holding on at all costs. Sometimes the greatest act of love is release, both for yourself and for those you part from. You honor the lessons they brought to your life, the growth they inspired, and you thank them quietly as you step into a new chapter filled with more peace and authenticity. You become more attuned to the rhythms of your body, your mind, and your spirit, noticing when you need rest, when you crave joy, when you long for deeper connection or solitude. You learn to listen to these whispers rather than drown them out with obligations or guilt. You cultivate practices that nourish your inner world, whether that is time in nature, creative expression, meditation, or simply moments of stillness and reflection. These habits become your fortress, a sanctuary you return to whenever the outside world threatens to overwhelm you. And in this sanctuary, you remember who you truly are beyond all roles, expectations, and histories. A soul worthy of unconditional love and profound respect. With this renewed sense of self, your life becomes a beacon not just for yourself, but for others who may be struggling to find their way. Your example lights a path of courage and compassion, showing that it is possible to live fully and fiercely without sacrificing your peace or your dignity. You inspire others to reclaim their boundaries, to choose their own well-being, and to cultivate relationships that honor their worth. And through this ripple effect, you contribute to a world where kindness is not cheapened by overextension, but treasured as a sacred gift, where love is not conditional or exhausting, but freeing and life-affirming. You come to realize that your peace is not just a personal treasure, but a vital force that radiates outward, healing and transforming all it touches. So you continue forward with gentle strength, embracing the beauty and impermanence of life, the ebb and flow of connection and solitude, giving yourself permission to grow, to heal, to love, and most importantly, to choose yourself every single day, because you have learned that the most enduring relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself. And nurturing it is the greatest act of kindness you can offer to the world.